This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 6th part of What If Naruto Was Bastard Son of Minato. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Naruto returned home with a sigh and a grin on his face. So much had happened in 3 days that it made him laugh because he was capable of doing such powerful things in such a short period of time. He had foiled multiple attempts to brainwash him into forced loyalty to a village that owed him nothing but scorn, rescued a Jinchuriki from her abusive village at the behest of her only true friend there, single-handedly wiped out the main forces of a shinobi village, killed a Jinchuriki while fully powered, and exacted his own personal revenge on the family that had abandoned him and his mother to rot and die. He was obviously pleased with himself. But he refused to let it get to his head because that was not who he was. Naruto had returned home to Haku, who had awoken and attempted to attack Fu because she had no idea who she was or why she was in their house. Naruto had arrived just in time to stop them fighting after Haku had said something very hurtful to Fu, causing him to fight back in rage. Naruto calmed them down and explained the situation that had brought Fu there, which irritated Haku because he had brought another woman into their home without informing her. It was at those words that she felt she was going to die, as Naruto's rage grew to astronomical proportions and was directed at her. He got on her case about going to fight in a war, knowing full well that when she left him the note, he would go and save her. He had violated his neutral status to save her, had to wipe out the entire Kiri army to conceal his involvement in the fight, and had so much blood on his hands that it sickened him once his sadistic side subsided. Hearing her be *tch about how he was wrong to help someone out of the goodness of his heart in order to save her from her abusers only enraged him, and Haku understood his rage. She nearly passed out from the argument, with tears streaming down her cheeks because he was correct, and after he finished yelling at her, she went to her room to think. "Did you have to be so hard on her?" Fu inquired. "I don't know her very well, or at all now that I think about it, but she genuinely cares for you from what I can tell." "She cares for me," Naruto sighed angrily, "but she had no right to force my hand like that." "How did she coerce you?" "It was your decision to attack their army." "Because by the time I arrived, the rebels had been slaughtered, leaving only Haku and a few others alive," Naruto explained. "If she had died, I would have exploded and attacked their village for murdering someone I care about. In any case, I may have committed genocide because I killed so many people, and without their army to protect them, Kiri is no longer a major village in this world." "Wow," Fu thought as she considered it, "when you put it that way, I see where you're coming from." "I hope so," Naruto said, "but I'm going to bed. If you need me, I'll be sleeping on the couch. Fighting an army is exhausting." Naruto walked away and promptly passed out on the couch. And as he slept, he wondered how his actions would affect the world in the coming weeks. 1 month later. Much had changed in the world as a result of Naruto's actions, as was to be expected. Some of it was good, but when you think about it, a lot of it was chaotic. The death of the Kan family had caused an uproar in the Fire Capital. It was to be expected given that they were a powerful family with both money and power to achieve such a position. There was a major investigation into their deaths, with those responsible refusing to speak out. The problem with the investigation was that all witnesses were either dead because the 3 members of the family had been brutally ripped apart, or, in Azula's case, beaten to death with enough sperm on her body to fully impregnate anyone. However, because there were so many samples, no single person could be identified for the obvious rape of such a prominent citizen. Those who had done it were silent about it because they were not stupid enough to announce it to the world. And, even though the investigation was ongoing, there were no leads because the family had far too many enemies in the world to narrow down the list of people who would do this to them. But it was the news of the defeat of not only the rebellion, but also the main forces of Kiri that shook the entire elemental continent. A few days after Naruto had left, some merchants discovered the bloody battlefield, and word quickly spread of the carnage that had been left there, with Gaara himself dead with a kunai in his throat. Kiri was basically defenseless at this point, which led to Mist Country trying so hard to maintain a strong appearance while failing miserably. As Naruto predicted, Kiri was attacked several times by various missing nin, the majority of whom used to live there but were kicked out in some way. And over the course of a month, their daimyo realized that the village was truly lost and made plans to liquidate it so that they could start over. And so the four great shinobi villages era began. While these major events had an impact on the elemental countries as a whole, little happened to Naruto himself, except for one thing. Danzo had spent years trying to find a way to use Naruto as a pawn in order to force him to submit in some way. He had sent countless root shinobi to capture him, but no matter how many he sent, the end result was always their deaths. So he tried to find something or someone he cared about to do so, but the problem was that he didn't care enough about anyone to kidnap without causing too much of a political controversy. That was the case, at least until his spies discovered Yuna. Naruto saw Yuna as the little sister he wished he had, one he supported through the worst of times and ensured she had the funds she needed to survive the long stretches of time he was not near his main office due to his profession. She even wanted to be a doctor like him and was studying hard to learn everything she could to achieve that goal. So Danzo was correct in assuming Naruto had a deep enough connection to her to use her as a hostage, and had his men kidnap her while leaving a note telling him where to go or else she would face the consequences for his refusal. Naruto discovered the note a day later, and his rage rivaled his feelings when he saw Haku nearly die on the executioner's block. He had only a few people in the world he truly loved, and Yuna was one of them, so he took this personally. He went to the designated location because he didn't have much of a choice. When he arrived, he was greeted by no less than 36 root shinobi, which made him smirk because they must have known he was a threat if they sent so many. The leader threw a box over and ordered Naruto to disarm himself of all weapons or Yuna would die. So he threw his cane and gloves into the box before kicking it back over. And the moment she did, he was grabbed from behind and strapped with chakra suppression cuffs. He felt weaker as a result of them, but he didn't worry about it. A bag was placed over his head to conceal the actual path they took to reach the secret underground base, as well as the specific halls they passed through to reach the room they had prepared for him. Naruto was shoved inside it harshly, and it was then that he removed his bag and found himself in a clear, yet thickly glassed, room within a larger room. There was no way in, and he had been pushed into the only opening from the top, which was now sealed off by a tube circulating air into the room. Naruto was fairly impressed with the setup, given how much effort had gone into containing him in this manner. It was at this point that Danzo appeared. He had a smirk on his face that Naruto wished he could just rip off with a dull knife so that this elderly man would never make it again in the most painful way possible. Danzo explained that Naruto now worked for him and that he would assist Danzo in finding a way to reverse his age and, eventually, immortality. He claimed that the room he was in was airtight, with the only air coming from the pump connected to it, preventing his blood abilities from being used to escape his prison cell. Because the glass was the thickest of the blast-proof variety, explosives would not work to break free. To top it all off, the girl had an explosive note surgically implanted into her body, so if he ever left through his door, Danzo would be aware and personally kill her via explosion. Naruto heard everything the man said and grew angrier as he spoke because the man's arrogance irritated him. So Naruto said he would do as instructed, but first he wanted to see Yuna. Danzo motioned for his men to go get the girl, smirking because he truly believed he had won here. So many plans ran through his mind, such as dethroning Minato as Hokage once he had not only his far younger body, but also more power that he would force Naruto to give him because the boy appeared to be capable of the impossible. He already knew where he was going to start, implanting Sharingan perfectly into his eyes, so he wouldn't have to hide the one he'd hidden behind the bandages. It didn't take long for his men to return the girl, who had been crying the entire time. Naruto approached her and assured her that everything would be fine and that she should trust him. Yuna wiped her eyes as she heard him say that, because he had said those exact words to her when he found her on the streets and offered her a place to call home, and she knew he meant them. Danzo then motioned for them to remove the girl because he wanted Naruto to begin doing his bidding. But things did not go as planned. While it was true that the setup Naruto had found himself in was intricate, with the means to counter not only his bloody bloodline but others he was certain Danzo was completely unaware of, the chakra suppression cuffs still on him kept him weaker than he wanted. There was only one issue. His primary ability, summoning an operating room, was not chakra-based. So, matching Danzo's smirk, he clicked his fingers and did 3 things faster than Danzo expected. The first was that he could easily remove his cuffs because he controlled reality in a room. The second was that he switched places with Danzo, trapping the man in the room he had spent so much time designing to trap Naruto within. The third thing he did was something that couldn't be seen, so it was a mystery to everyone except Naruto because he did it. Before Danzo could respond, Naruto stabbed the root shinobi in the neck with the end of the cuffs and then left them there as he dragged Yuna away from his dying body. Yuna shed tears of joy because Naruto had saved her, and he returned her hug. He then opened a door to his operating room and told her to wait inside because he had some business here. She did, and the door vanished as soon as she stepped inside. Danzo was understandably irritated because his plans had gone horribly wrong. He demanded Naruto release him or the girl would perish. Naruto actually laughed and went so far as to dare him to kill her. Danzo then made the hand sign to activate the explosive seal, but if he had paid any attention to Naruto's face, he would have noticed his smirk and reconsidered doing so. But the man was obstinate, and he was determined to show this brat what happened to those who refused his orders. The explosion went off without a hitch, but it was Danzo who blew up, not Yuna. He had removed the explosive seal from within her and placed it in Danzo while the room was up and running. If they had used a different method of sealing, such as ink to skin or carving it in, Naruto would have been unable to do anything for a while because it would have required careful planning. However, they had implanted a literal rolled-up piece of chakra paper with an explosive seal inside her, making it simple to remove. Naruto grinned triumphantly and turned to go collect his belongings, but he came to a halt when he noticed Danzo's body had vanished and he was still alive in the cell. This raised his brow because he was curious as to how the hell he did it. From what he knew, only Hidan and Kakazu had something resembling immortality, and he still managed to kill those two. This was something new. Danzo was still agitated about being let out, threatening to destroy everything he cared about. If his demands are not met, every woman he has ever loved, every mouth he has ever kissed, and every hand he has ever shaken will die by his hand. Naruto wasn't scared or intimidated because Danzo was, in all honesty, like a shark in a tank. Sure, he appeared menacing, but he couldn't do anything in his cage. But then a light bulb went off in his head, and he smiled as he came up with a wicked plan. He walked over to the air purifier attached to the pump, which he noticed had a slot in it for adding what he assumed was knockout gas whenever they needed something from him or the like, and it was in that slot that Naruto placed a vial of his blood. He saw as his blood began to spray into the cell, which Danzo saw and turned white with fear after hearing what happened to those whose blood his blood touched. He quickly wrapped himself in the sheets from the cot that had been placed in the cell, but it didn't help much, and Naruto's blood eventually found its way into his skin. When Naruto arrived, he used it to see what made the old man tick, and it was then that he noticed the grafted arm with the multiple Sharingans, one of which was dead from what he assumed was Danzo's explosive demise a few minutes before. Now that he understood what was going on, he used his blood to cause the inhuman limb to explode off Danzo's body, splattering blood on the cell glass walls as Danzo screamed in pain. Naruto smirked as he turned off the air pump and ripped the switch off, ensuring that it remained turned off. He then left the room, wondering if Danzo would die from blood loss or asphyxiation. Within 30 minutes, Naruto had carved a literal bloody path through the halls of the Root HQ, taking his time and collecting more blood to use against the Root. Shinobi who had no idea their master had died in such a heinous way. The man was the type to make decisions from the shadows, so it was only natural that he died in them as well. They tried to incapacitate him with various means because their master would be angry if Naruto died, but Naruto used the blood he sucked out of the Rutanin to not only defend against their attacks, but also to form projectiles and aim for vital spots. Naruto felt as his sadistic side grew the more root he killed, but he eventually found the box containing his gear and put his gloves back on and twirled his cane out of habit. As he did so, he felt the bloodlust leave his body, and with a good-natured chuckle, he opened another door and left this place for good, knowing that a major thorn in his side had been removed. But that was in the past, and today was the day before the Chunin exam finals. Naruto had arrived with Haku, who had finally gotten his forgiveness after a week of begging him for basically forcing his hand in a war he didn't want to be a part of, but with the warning to never do it again or he swore he would leave her and never speak to her again. It appeared to be a light sentence, but what he meant was that if and or when she needed medical attention that no one else could provide, he would not help her because he had severed all ties to her. This would be horrific if it happened, but for now it was in the back of their minds as they made their way to Konoha after meeting with Onoki and Kurasuchi, who had been training herself into the ground for the fight she would have with Haku today for the past month. Sure, they had to fight someone else first, but from what they'd seen and heard, the women they were fighting were nothing more than fangirls who were weak, so they wouldn't be too much of a bother. They arrived in the village and checked into their hotel rooms without incident. While the others went about their business, Naruto got a refund for his room because he didn't intend to spend the night there. They had attempted to infiltrate his mind the last time he did so. And, while he had injected himself with the means to prevent any further attempts, that didn't mean they wouldn't resort to far more drastic measures if given the opportunity. Plus, this was the last time Naruto planned to return to this village, with the emphasis on planned because things could change in the future, so he decided to stay in his old apartment. Years ago, he shared it with his mother. This was a way for him to remember why he not only helped those in need, but also fought those who deserved it. But before he got there, he walked around and talked to a few shinobi from the village, all the while trying to find out where Anko was since the procedure to remove her curse had failed. Mark was fully prepared. All he needed was her. It took some time, but he eventually found her at a bar with a few other women, one of whom he recognized as Hana Inuzuka. She lost the color in her face as Naruto approached because she would never forget how he forced her entire clan, give or take a dozen members, to submit and even threatened to kill them if they did not stop hunting him for what he did to Kiba. In the case of the now amputated runt, Sume and the other clan leaders had met him in his room, where he would remain for the time being until his prosthetics were made so he could at least get around by wheelchair, albeit slowly. Sume had asked her friend Kushina for a seal, a powerful truth seal that made the one who wore it unable to lie. She did so, but she kept the reasons for Sume's need to herself for the time being. She had placed the seal on Kiba with little difficulty, but the boy had no hands to stop her, so that was a given. She interrogated him about his previous actions towards Naruto, and what she learned only made her fully understand the boy's rage towards her son. Kiba went on to describe in great detail what he and the other children had done to the poor boy over the years. He even laughed when they found that crybaby, as he called him, at his mother's grave and laughed at him. Kiba showed no remorse for torturing the boy over his own mother's grave, and in fact took sick pleasure in it, because a Zeta male should just roll over and die, but this one had defied the natural order and tried to defend himself against an alpha like himself. Sume felt rage well up in her eyes at this point because she had no idea she had allowed her son to become this monster. So she punched him hard and told him he was an abomination to the name of their clan. Kiba had expressed his rage at those words, but Sume only hit him harder, this time in the throat, so he couldn't respond. She told him that they were now thinking about kicking him out of the clan as a whole because his actions were not what they were about, and that the fact that they were willing to defend his actions at one point in time despite being family was horrifying to her. She left on those words, her tears still falling for having given birth to a monster of a son like Kiba. They'd been debating what to do with the boy for days. While they wanted to disown him as a clan member, the truth was that if they threw him out like that, he would die because he couldn't heal from his injuries. No doctor, short of Naruto himself, could heal him, and he had made it clear he would not do so, and after hearing what he and the other clan heirs had done to him years ago, they did not blame him. While Sume knew Kiba deserved what he got in the end, she was still his mother and would not let him die on the streets. So it was at that precise moment that Naruto's words came to mind. Until he begs for someone to put him out of his misery, and when Sume his own mother doesn't have the heart to end his life, let me know because I have no qualms about doing it. And with that thought, she sobbed again because she knew what she had to do, but it still hurt to think about. Hana had been present when Sume called a meeting of the clan heads, and she had told them all about what her son had done, along with their own children. She told them this as a warning because Naruto had crippled Kiba beyond repair in retaliation for what he had done, and there was no telling what he would do to the rest of their own children. They couldn't believe their own children would do something like this, but the amount of damage done to Kiba meant it had to be personal. So, with each of them also receiving a truth seal, they all heard the truth from their own children about the pain they inflicted on the boy they had no idea existed until he became known as the Surgeon of Death. To say they were angry would be an understatement, but then the fear set in that he would try to harm their own children, and plans to make amends came to mind, at least for a few of them. While she was angry at her daughter's actions, Kushina believed she could defend herself because she was the daughter of two infamous shinobi as well as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. She was still disappointed in her, which hurt Naruto deeply emotionally. Shikamaru was part of the group that hurt Naruto, but he had never participated in the incident, so he only got a few swings of his mother's pan across the head for not assisting the poor boy when he needed it, and then there was Hinata, who was actually praised for her ability to put a filthy commoner in his place. They were relieved that she was not fighting in the exams because Naruto would almost certainly do something horrific similar to what he had done to Kiba if they fought, and since it was in a legal setting, they couldn't do anything about it. They had no idea what Naruto had already done to her, and they wouldn't for a long time because the poison was deliberately slow-acting. So Naruto met with Anko and asked her to accompany him because the preparations were complete and the means to remove the curse mark on her were ready to do as he stated. Anko jumped out of her seat, ecstatic because she had been anticipating this day for a month and was overjoyed that it had finally arrived. She'd begun to wonder if he duped her out of her money, but his reappearance had only fueled her desire to finally get rid of the damned thing. Naruto opened the door to his operating room, but before she could enter, he shot her in the neck with a tranquilizer. The other two women she was with got up because they thought he was doing something wrong. But he reassured them that everything was fine. It was just that the procedure was painful and that it would be better if she was knocked out for it to happen. They agreed to this, but they questioned the logic. He asked them to stay because the procedure would be quick and she would need her friends to drive her home to sleep it off. Naruto placed her on the operating table and strapped her down because she was likely to thrash all over the place if she wasn't, making the procedure far more difficult than it needed to be. He went into his secret room after she was in place and got the clone of her he had made with her blood, or at least the top part of her because he wasn't using her for organ farming. And, while this may appear to be a bad thing, what he did was replicate the organs of people who needed them in order to transplant them back into the person who paid for them once they were ready, ensuring that they received the correct one without having to wait for one that was a match. Sure, he still had plenty on hand to treat those who couldn't wait for the organ to clone, but that was just being ready. This half-clone was to be discarded immediately, so he only allowed it to reach this point rather than a full one. He summoned a room and used his soul transfer power to move the curse mark to the cloned body once it was nearby. Anko's body was wildly thrashing from the pain because the thing had burrowed deep over the years, but after a few minutes of extracting every last bit of it from her body, she was now completely free of the accursed thing. He picked up the clone and carried it into a side room with an incinerator to burn things that needed to be destroyed, such as this. Because the clone had no brain function, it didn't feel anything as it burned to ash. He unclipped Anko from the table, piggybacked her out of the operating room, and handed her off to her friends, or at least one of them, since Hana had left for some reason that didn't matter to him. He assured her friend that she would be fine, and that the tranquilizer would keep her out for a few hours, but that she would be fine, albeit a little achy from the procedure he performed. He then left because she had paid a month in advance and there was no reason for him to stay. He heard his name being called out as he walked 2 blocks away, and he couldn't remember where he had heard the voice before, though he knew it was from somewhere. When he turned around, he saw Hana and her mother Sume, the latter with a guilty expression on her face. "Ah," Naruto said, looking around for a split second to see if the rest of the Inuzuka clan was there to surround him like last time. But when he didn't see them, he knew they weren't here to ambush him, as he had assumed. "Is that Sume Inuzuka?" "Yes," the woman said sadly. "What prompted you to seek me out today?" Naruto inquired. "Since the last time we met, it was not the most pleasant of circumstances, what with threats to my life and threats to annihilate your clan being thrown around. To be honest, I never expected to see you again, and even if you did, it wouldn't be so soon. I've come to finish the job you started," Sume stated flatly, though Naruto could easily detect the pain in her voice. "And what exactly is that job?" asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. "You have to be specific when it comes to me because I have so many clients and it's hard to remember what I did to help who." Sume gritted his teeth and said, "My son." It hurt her to be here asking for this, but it was bound to happen one way or another. Sume was simply choosing the least painful option. "You left him crippled in a way that cannot be healed. Now I'm asking you to do what you said and put an end to his suffering." "Ah," Naruto reflected as he remembered what he had said earlier, "so I'm guessing he's begged for this and you, as his mother, don't have the heart to do it yourself?" "No," Sume replied. "The reason I wish you to do it is that he is to be disowned and kicked out of our clan, but as he is, he will die because no one will care for an amputated cripple like him, and he lacks the funds and means to survive on his own like this." "So you want me to do it because he'll die worse that way?" asked Naruto, who could see the whole picture. "Yes," Sume said, her tears still streaming down her cheeks, "but as his mother, I only have one request." "Which is it?" "Kill him as painlessly as you can," Sume said, looking him in the eyes. He could see her anguish as the tears flowed, because she was asking a man, the same one who had put her son in such a predicament, to kill him. No mother should ever feel bad for asking that, or for asking anything in general, but these were extraordinary circumstances. "That I can do," Naruto said with a simple nod of his head, "because my vengeance was complete the moment I took his arms and legs from him, along with his future shinobi career. I don't want to cause any more pain when I've already caused enough." "Then please follow me," Sume said, thinking that the sooner the deed was completed, the faster she could recover from the ordeal. She was relieved that Hana was not like her younger brother, who had a sadistic side that she had only recently discovered. So Naruto followed her to their clan compound, and as he approached Kiba's room, he noticed the clan members backing away from him, as the memory of what he did the last time they challenged him was still fresh in their minds, and they would not forget it anytime soon. Sume showed him the door and then left, because she couldn't be here. Hana only looked at Naruto for a split second before departing to console their mother. Naruto stepped into the room after taking a deep breath. He noticed Kiba lying on his bed. But he figured that would be the case because he was now an amputee and couldn't get up and walk around like he used to. "What the fuck are you doing here?" growled Kiba, enraged that Naruto, of all people, had entered his room in this manner. He was enraged that he didn't have the means to fight him off, nor did he have Akamaru to do it on his orders after Naruto had killed his dog in their fight. "I am here to end your pain," Naruto stated simply as he stood at the foot of his bed. "Oh really?" Kiba smirked, thinking that his family had finally come to their senses and forgiven him for his actions while also paying Naruto to fix him. "So, what the fuck are you waiting for? Do it right now." "As you wish," Naruto said as he took out a syringe and stabbed him in the neck before pushing down on the plunger. Kiba felt his body lock up from whatever Naruto had injected him with, but then the pain shot through his body and he couldn't scream because of the paralytic that had been injected into him alongside the poison. "Did you think I meant to return your arms and legs to you?" Naruto smirked. "Your mother asked me to euthanize you right now because she didn't have the heart to do it." While I would like to stand here and gloat about the situation, that is more your style than mine." And with his final words, Naruto left the room, leaving Kiba to scream in his mind as he felt his body grow weaker and weaker, until he felt nothing as the poison eventually shut down his body completely and he died in his own room. The mutt who lost both his fangs and his claws. Naruto said nothing as he walked out of the compound, instead simply nodding as he passed Sume and her daughter because there were no words to say here. Naruto then returned to his old home to rest for the night, as he had nothing else planned for the day, having only set out to help Anko because she had paid him to do so. Kiba's murder had come as a surprise, but he could see why she had asked him to do it. So, having completed all of his tasks, he arrived at his old apartment. Once there, memories of his life with his mother surfaced, and he couldn't help but cry as he remembered the simpler times when she was still a part of his life. He would give anything to have her back, but there was no way. And he was fine with it because he planned on starting his own family and telling his own children about his mother. He then unpacked a sleeping bag and sat on it before pulling out his now signed copy of the Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi and opening it up before beginning to read aloud as his mother had done for him years before. He did so until sleep came to him, and he fell asleep with the same warmth he had felt years before when his mother was there to comfort him. The following day, the arena where the Chunin exams were being held was packed to capacity because many people from other villages had come to witness these events as well as those who lived in the village. What piqued their interest the most was the inclusion of the infamous Surgeon of Death on its roster, as the man was known to be both powerful and sadistic, with those who witnessed it firsthand not living to tell the tale. For many of them, the opportunity to see if he lived up to the rumors was too good to pass up. With the exception of Naruto and Neji, all of the participants had arrived in the arena. Neji was easy to understand because everyone assumed he was dead for reasons Hiyashi refused to reveal, claiming clan matters and such, so people just assumed he was dead. Naruto was a bit more of a surprise because he was already known to be in the village. Since word got around, his presence was well known wherever he went. So the question here was, where was he? Even Haku and Kurasuchi were surprised because they had knocked on his door to inform him that it was time to get up and head to the arena, but no one had answered. They went to the front desk to ask for help because they were afraid something had happened, but that was not the case because the man at the reception desk told them that Naruto had gotten a refund for the room and had left to find another place to stay for the night. This perplexed them because they had no idea why he would do such a thing or where he would go. Minato calmed the ecstatic crowd by announcing the start of the finals. He called out for both Naruto and Gaara to stay in the stadium, which Gaara was able to do because he was already there. Naruto was not present, which led people to wonder where he was because, contrary to popular belief, the man was not a coward. Many began to wonder if he had been kidnapped by Konoha's forces in the middle of the night, and many began to wonder if those words were true. This made Minato growl a little because, while he wouldn't have cared if he was accused of such things because there would be no evidence and people would forget it in time, the problem was that he didn't have the brat. Not for want of trying, mind you. He had attempted to use a Yamanaka to infiltrate his mind once more, but Naruto was not in his assigned room, nor was he anywhere where his shinobi could find him, so his plans had failed. Minato had even used what was left of Root to try and find him, but even they were unable to locate him, which puzzled him greatly because how could the brat hide from his forces while in the very village that he ruled? It perplexed him more than the fact that he was not present at the time. Nonetheless, Minato called out Naruto's name again and again. He stated that this was the final time because he would be disqualified if he did not arrive now. However, just as he was about to declare Gaara's victory, someone called out for them to look. Naruto walked in calmly, emitting a deathly aura as he walked towards the center of the arena to face his opponent. Naruto arrived and took his assigned spot with a solemn expression on his face. Gaara and his opponent exchanged the same look as the proctor announced the start of their fight. Naruto made Gaara back up a little to put some space between them because he was aware of the wires he was using. His sand had felt them tighten around them, but he jumped back to escape, which made Naruto smirk a little because he was smart enough to do so. While the boy thought he was safe at the distance he was at, that was not the case, and he wasn't about to change his mind just yet.
He took out a storage scroll and opened it before tossing it to the ground.
3 large wooden barrels emerged from it. Gaara didn't know what was in them, but he wasn't about to stand there and let Naruto use whatever was in them, so he threw a sand tendril at them and pierced one of them. As he threw out his hands, Naruto only smirked. This caused the blood in the barrel to quickly seep through the sand towards Gaara.
This caused the boy's eyes to widen because he had no idea there was blood in the barrels, but he then dispelled the tendril and came to a halt 2/3 of the way.
Gaara couldn't relax because as soon as he dispelled the tendril, he had to dodge the other 2 barrels Naruto threw at him. They missed their target, but exploded upon impact with the ground. Gaara was about to attack, but a voice in his head warned him to be careful, so he formed a shield to protect his back, which was a good thing because the blood from the barrels had tried to hit him from behind. The sand blocked them, but Naruto had anticipated this and used it as a form of shock and awe rather than an actual attack. He now had a large pool of blood surrounding him that he could use as he pleased. Gaara used his sand to attack from various angles, but Naruto's blood easily deflected them like a shield. To be honest, he was stalling. He could easily end this, but that would require him to use something no one knew he possessed, and since he didn't want to reveal too much in front of the 2 people he wanted to hurt the most in this arena, he refrained from using said abilities. So he was devising a strategy to defeat Gaara without revealing too much. Gaara became increasingly enraged as his attacks failed to penetrate Naruto's bloody shield. This guy was supposed to be the one with the shielded body, not him. The voice in his head was only increasing his anger, which suited him well because his anger fueled his power. Gaara eventually got tired of it and slammed his hand hard onto the ground. Pulsing his demonic chakra through the ground caused a tidal wave of sand to hit Naruto, who raised an eyebrow because he had not expected this and yet had a way to power through it. He dipped his cane into the blood that was still pooling at his feet. He shaped it into a claymore and sliced the sandy tidal wave down the middle. The crowd applauded because it was an incredible feat to witness, but Naruto was not finished because he used several wires embedded into the wall behind Gaara to launch forward through the gap in his sandy attack and kicked Gaara right in the face with enough force to launch him back hard into the wall. Naruto had activated his steel release on his foot to increase its effectiveness. The power of the kick cracked Gaara's armor, but Naruto threw out both hands and pulled in even faster towards the wall and into his body. The double-footed kick completely shattered his sand armor, and Naruto kicked off Gaara with enough force to knock the wind out of him and put some distance between them. He could have continued the assault, but he wasn't about to get greedy and get crushed unexpectedly. Gaara went down on all fours and roared in rage. As the demon inside began to take control, the sand began to mold around his body. Gaara began to launch multiple air blasts at him in rapid succession after gaining sufficient power. Naruto realized why he was doing this after a minute when he felt his foot sink into the ground, followed by the rest of his body, with his hand being the last thing sticking out as he tried to grab something to pull himself out before it too sank below the ground. "Sand-binding coffin!" exclaimed Gaara with a sinister grin as the sickening crunch of bones and the squishing of organs was heard as the ground compacted itself around Naruto. At this point, no one could say anything. Haku and Kurasuchi felt as if their hearts had stopped beating since the man they loved appeared to have been killed. Even Minato and Onoki were speechless because they had no idea what was going to happen. Rasa simply smirked, knowing that his son was a capable weapon if he could kill such an infamous man as the Surgeon of Death. No one knew what to say or do, but many people began to mourn his death because he would be missed by many of the people he had helped in the past. That is something that no normal person could possibly survive. However, Naruto was not your average person. Not in the least. So, just as Minato was about to call the match in Gaara's favor, their shock grew as they saw Naruto's hand shoot out of the ground before there was an explosion that made it impossible to see what was going on. They wished they hadn't when it cleared because what they saw was nothing short of horrifying. Naruto's body was messed up in numerous ways, with crushed parts of his body here, limbs turned the wrong way there, and so on. The main question they were all asking was how he was still alive, and unbeknownst to everyone except Naruto, the answer was simple. He had removed all vital organs prior to this match using his ability to remove organs and place them in special containers to keep them safe right now. The only thing he had on him that was vital was his brain, which he had protected by using steel release to keep his head from being crushed into paste. Explosion release had set him free from his earthly prison, which brings us to this point. Naruto is unable to continue, stated the proctor because, based on what he saw, Naruto would require serious medical attention and there was no need to continue. He was stopped, however, by Naruto, who laughed at his statement. "Oh, I'm still quite capable of continuing," Naruto said, waving his messed up hand against an equally messed up arm, "so no need to stop this." "Are you sure?" asked the proctor, who couldn't do anything if Naruto continued. "Without a doubt." "All right then," the proctor said, taking a step back to see what was going on. He looked at Minato for a response, but the man waved him off because he was curious about where this was going. "You were a fool to try beating me again," Gaara said in a demonic voice, "because you no longer have the strength to oppose me." "What?" chuckled Naruto, "because of all my messed up body parts? You know what they say about appearances being deceiving." Gaara then watched as a steady stream of the blood Naruto had used to fight him before emerged from the ground, latching onto Naruto. Gaara and everyone else could only watch in awe as his body completely healed itself in a matter of 12 seconds. His arms and legs snapped back into place as the rest of his body refilled to normal size. Gaara's mouth dropped open in shock because what he had done was not humanly possible. "Who or what are you?" "Me?" said Naruto, holding out his hand. His cane, which had been made with his blood infused into the metal, as well as his hat, which he dusted off before putting it back on his head, emerged from the ground. "I'm the most difficult person to fight. I'm a tenacious man who refuses to die. But I have to admit, I didn't expect to have to work as hard against you. Please allow me to finish this." Gaara threw out more sand tendrils in rage as his opponent quickly negated pretty much everything he had done to him. He wasn't thinking clearly and had attempted to attack him in the same way he had begun, which had failed. Everyone watching expected him to use his blood again, but instead he simply vanished from his spot before reappearing behind Gaara. "Did you really expect that to work?" Naruto asked before Gaara tried to slash him with his sandy claws again because he was within range. Naruto vanished once more, but it was then that Gaara noticed the sand around him began to float upwards for some reason. Then his vision of the crowd vanished because he was now caught in the middle of a miniature twister that Naruto was creating by moving so quickly around him. This was the power of his swift release, allowing him to move at inhuman speeds comparable to Rock Lee's, but without the strenuous exercise required. Gaara attempted to stop Naruto with his sands, but the winds were too strong heading up, so anything he sent out shot straight up instead. But what made matters worse was that he began to suffocate because the air around him was rapidly thinning. The vortex he was creating was sucking away the oxygen, causing Gaara to collapse as he gasped for air. When Gaara started to turn blue, Naruto stopped what he was doing and moved a good distance away from him as Gaara coughed to catch his breath. "You seem to have a problem opening up," Naruto said with a sinister grin. He didn't like being nearly crushed to death and buried alive, so he was going to go out on a limb here and repay the favor. Sure, he was going against his initial plan of not flaunting himself too much, but he had an image to uphold and so many people saw him being buried that he had to prove to them that he was not to be trifled with all over again. As he gathered power, he held out his hand, which began to glow a fiery red. "Scorch release," Naruto said as he launched his attack, Incinerate. Out of his hand blasted a massive cone of flames that covered roughly 2/3 of the arena in size, the heat of which sunburned many people in the arena's front row. Gaara saw it coming at him so fast that he shielded himself with as much sand as he could and hoped, no. Prayed that it would be enough. Fortunately for him, it was, if only just. The arena was now smoldering from the flames he had used to attack Gaara, whose sand had turned to glass as a result of the heat. Rasa broke out in cold sweat as he saw Naruto use a bloodline that had died with the previous user years ago. Rasa, Minato inquired, perplexed as to how Naruto had another bloodline like this and seeking an explanation. What do you know about that ability? There was only one person with such a bloodline, Rasa, still stunned, explained, and Pakura never had children. So, how did he get her ancestry? Minato joined him in his train of thought, but they couldn't help but notice the fight below them, and they were surprised that things had escalated so quickly in the first match. It gave them the impression that many of the others would be boring in comparison. Naruto laughed as he observed Gaara's fear of moving behind his newly formed glass barrier. The sand that covered him had also turned to glass, and he had no idea what to do because this had never been a factor in his entire life because no one had ever used fire against him hot enough to do so.
Naruto then used his swift release to rapidly vibrate his cane, causing him to slam into the ground.
The shockwave of his actions shattered not only the glass in front of him between him and Gaara, but also those who wore glasses or anything made of glass in general. Gaara looked up to see Naruto approaching him slowly, his cane out, blood pooling at the tip that formed the blade of the scythe he was famous for wielding. Naruto instilled fear in Gaara by using his conqueror's haki on him alone. Gaara saw a massive shadowy demon that dwarfed not only him but also the Biju within him in size. Gaara crawled away from him, telling him to leave him alone as he broke out in a cold sweat. Gaara couldn't go any further because there was a wall in the way, and now there was a bloody blade at his throat. "Do you yield?" Naruto asked simply. Gaara's Biju was screaming at him to surrender for the sake of Kami. "Yes," Gaara exclaimed loudly for the proctor to hear, "I yield." "Naruto!" exclaimed the proctor. Naruto smirked as he drew his weapon away from Gaara, who exhaled a huge sigh of relief. Naruto then took something from his bag and tossed it at him, which he caught. He noticed a small bag filled with pills. "What are these?" Gaara inquired, perplexed as to why Naruto had given him these. "You are showing clear signs of the negative effects of insomnia," Naruto smirked. "Take one pill at night with food and you won't feel such things in a week at most." "Why are you assisting me?" "I attempted to murder you." "Yes," Naruto reflected, "you did. But you were always my opponent, never my foe." "What's the difference?" Gaara, who didn't understand the distinction, asked. "The difference is that you're still alive," Naruto said with a sadistic smirk. "Feel free to request more pills in the future if you require them. They are simple to make and inexpensive. I gave you enough money to last about 2 months." He then left Gaara to reflect on what had just occurred, but he then lifted his body off the ground, his arms stinging like hell, but his sand had literally been burned into glass on it, so he wasn't going to question why. Naruto walked over to where the rest of the contestants were sitting, and they all looked at him with mixed emotions. He sat between Haku and Kurasuchi, both of whom he knew had a lot of questions. "I know you have questions," Naruto sighed, "but I'll only answer one right now for the sake of time. So make an informed decision. Where the hell were you?" Haku asked, with Kurasuchi nodding because that was the exact question she needed answered right now. "I was visiting the grave of someone dear to me," Naruto explained simply, "but then I received an unexpected guest who didn't take no for an answer and became violent." "Wait," Haku paused, "who did that?" "Oh yeah," Naruto smirked, knowing he was about to answer her question as well as announce a major event. "As a result, we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. Hello, Hokage." His shout drew the attention of not only the person he wanted to hear him, but also of many others who wondered why he had called out the Hokage like that out of the blue. Your village has, or had, a significant serpent infestation. But luckily for you, I had the proper skills to eradicate it before it became too much of a problem, Naruto said as he threw something out for Minato to see. Many people looked to see what he had thrown at the Hokage, and there was a sharp gasp followed by silence. Naruto had thrown the head of none other than Orochimaru, the treacherous Sannin.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.